How do you forecast project team workloads using Microsoft Project? I'm Tony Zink, and this is the Project Guide. Hi folks, Tony Zink here, project management author and trainer, and creator of the Project Manifesto. I show people how to use tools and techniques to get better results faster on their projects, whether that means saving time, saving money, reducing risks, or providing a more stress-free and pleasant experience for everyone involved in the project. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing or following me on your favorite social media channel. And if you're not tuning in directly on my website, tonyzink.com, then you can go there to find the video for this episode and others like it. You can see the links to go to see where I hang out on social media, and you can follow me if you'd like to get updates whenever I post new webinars like this one or training videos on my website, and you can find other goodies on my website too. So if you manage projects, chances are you've had problems with managing resources on those projects and managing resource workloads. From time to time, you might have problems that you run into, such as getting the right people at the right time in order to keep your project on track. If you can't get those people when you need them, then you oftentimes have delays to your project. Sometimes you have delays also when team members are pulled away because they need to work on other things. Oftentimes when people work on projects, it's not their main duty, and they have a day job or they have daily responsibilities that they need to take care of. And working on a project comes above and beyond those day-to-day responsibilities that they may have. And so if you haven't factored that into planning for your project, then chances are they will get pulled away and it's going to delay your project because you haven't planned for it. Another thing that you might run into is trying to play catch-up when things like this happen. When people aren't available when you need them, when people get pulled away, and if you need to play catch-up on your project to make up the time that you've lost, then sometimes you're forced to ask your team members to work overtime, which they're oftentimes not very happy about. And then you're not going to be very happy about it if you have to actually pay them for their overtime, and that could then cause you to incur extra costs on your project. So what you really need to do to try to do your best to avoid things like this from happening on your project is to create a realistic project schedule incorporating realistic personnel plans or resource plans in your project. What I'm going to show you here today is a 5-step process using Microsoft Project to create a project schedule with a realistic workload forecast for your team. Some of these steps you'll be able to do using other project scheduling tools, but today I kind of usually hold Microsoft Project as the gold standard in project scheduling, and so I'm going to demonstrate how to do these 5 steps today using Microsoft Project. So let me switch over to my computer screen and I'll get started. So on my screen here, you should be able to see a project schedule that I've created using Microsoft Project. And I happen to be using Microsoft Project Professional 2016, the latest and greatest version of Microsoft Project. And then what you should also see here is several tasks organized into various phases throughout the course of this particular project. And in this particular case, in this scenario, I am a project manager, and I work for a company where we install, among other things, we install electric vehicle charging equipment for some of our customers. And so this particular project involves installing some electric vehicle or EV charging equipment for our customer, the Beachcomber Resort. Anyway, so you can see here that I have several different tasks laid out, and I have duration estimates for all of these tasks. And then Microsoft Project has calculated a timeline for me based on all of these tasks, their sequencing, and the duration estimates that I've entered into or entered against each one of these tasks. The project is scheduled to start on July 9th, and it's scheduled to finish, the way it stands right now, it's scheduled to finish on November 12th. And you can also see here that I have resources assigned to several of these tasks. There's a couple that I've left off here so I can demonstrate how to assign resources to tasks, but I've already done some of the legwork, so you don't need to be bored watching me assign resources to 30 or so different tasks in my project schedule. But what I want to draw your attention here to, though, is that I've done the first step already, and that is laying out all of the activities in this project, or all of the tasks, and entering realistic duration estimates against each one of these tasks. Without that, we're not going to get very far into creating realistic workload forecasts for our project. So since I've already done that, I'm going to move on to step 2 here, which is estimating the types of people who are going to be needed on this project. And I'm going to be doing that using a special type of a resource in Microsoft Project called a generic resource. Now let me switch over to a different view here. We're looking at the Gantt chart view right now. Let me switch over to a different view called the resource sheet view. This is a view that allows us to enter or view all of the resources, whether they be people or materials or equipment or what have you, all the different types of resources that I'm utilizing to get things done on my project. And so you can see here that I have 6 different resources that I've already laid out or I've already entered into my resource sheet. These are the resources that I'm going to use to get things done on my project. And if you read through this list of resource names, you'll see that they're all generic sounding names. They're not person's real names like Tony or Betty or Bob. They're generic sounding names or basically generic placeholders that allow us to specify what types of people or what types of resources I think I'm going to need on the various tasks in my project. So examples here would be concrete contractor, electrical contractor, and so forth. So let me switch back over now to my Gantt chart view. And then since I've already entered those resource names into the resource sheet, I don't need to type their names into my project schedule anymore. Now it can just be a matter of me selecting from that set of resources to assign different people to different tasks. So if I look here at task number 3, select charging equipment supplier and hardware model, I can see here that I have a 5-day duration estimate already entered in for this task. And I've already estimated that this task should take 40 hours of work effort to complete. And so there's a number of different ways you can assign resources to tasks in Microsoft Project. One of my favorite ways to do it is using the Assign Resources dialog box. So if I go up here and click the Resource tab, click the Assign Resources button, that'll open up the Assign Resources dialog box. Again, you can see here that I don't need to type in those people's names or those resources' names. They're already here ready for me to select to assign to a task. So if I simply select the task that I want to assign somebody to, task number 3, and then if I select the name of the resource that I want to assign, in this case here I want to assign the installation engineer, and just click Assign, it'll automatically assign that resource to that task that I selected, with a 5-day duration and 40 hours of work effort. Now, the next thing that I'm going to want to consider here is using realistic allocations when I assign people to tasks. So when I assigned the installation engineer resource to this task number 3, I already had a 5-day duration estimate and a 40-hour work estimate. If I go down here to the next task, task number 4, purchase charging equipment hardware, I can see that I also already have a duration estimate of 5 days and a work effort estimate of 20 hours. Now, if I just stop and think about this for a moment, I can look at these two numbers and I can estimate that this person, whoever I assign to this task, they're probably not going to be working full time. 20 hours over 5 days is about half time. So if I select that task, and then select the resource that I want to assign to that task, in this case, the project manager, and then click the Assign button, you'll see here that it automatically assigns that resource at 50% units, or assignment units, or allocation units. If I were to undo that, let me just remove that resource. And Maybe I don't already have a work effort estimate. I do have a duration estimate still. This task should take 5 days to complete, but maybe I don't know how many hours. However, I do know that it's going to take this person, the project manager in this case, 50% of their time to get that task done over that 5-day duration. I can go in here and I can enter 50, for 50% in the units column, and then click assign, and that'll give me the same result to assigning that project manager half time or 50% to that task. And then you'll notice here that it calculated 20 hours of work for that task. So those three variables, the duration, the work effort, and the assignment units, those three numbers are tied together in a really simple equation. Work equals duration times units. But moral of the story here is, as you're assigning people to tasks, you should not only be thinking about who should be doing the task, like I specified here, I assign the installation engineer or the project manager, but you should also be thinking about a realistic allocation. How much of that person's time do you think you're really going to need to get that task done? And use that information to assign that person to the task to get a realistic workload forecast for each person in your project. So moving on here, next we should think about the whether when we actually put real people on these tasks, because eventually it's not going to be installation engineer or project manager or technical writer. It's going to be real people working on these tasks. It's going to be Tony or Betty or Sue or Tom working on these tasks. So let me just demonstrate here what happens when I replace one of these generic resources with a real person's name. If I scroll a little bit further down into my project schedule here, I can see here that I have on a few of these tasks a technical writer assigned. I've got a technical writer assigned to task number 25, create charging equipment usage procedures. I have a technical writer assigned also to task number 27, create charging equipment maintenance procedures. And I have a technical writer assigned to task number 32, create EV charging marketing collateral. So I want to replace the technical writer on these three tasks with the real person's name who's going to be assigned to these three tasks. In this case, it's going to be a person called John McCartney. So let me go back over to the resource sheet view where all of my resources are listed, and I'm going to type in John's name, John McCartney. He doesn't have anything assigned to him yet, so I can see here in the work column, there's a 0. And I don't have an hourly or standard rate set up for him yet. So I'm going to say that when John is working on this project, he's going to have the same hourly rate as what I had the technical writer set up for on this project, which is $60 an hour. So I'll put in there 60 for his standard rate. That's optional, but if you want to track costs on your project, then you're going to want to put hourly rates in for your resources when you enter them into your resource sheet. So now, back to my Gantt chart view. I can then use that same Assign Resources dialog box to replace that generic technical writer resource with John McCartney. So let me just make a couple of adjustments here so you can see what's going on. So task number 25 needs a replacement of technical writer to John. Task number 27 needs a replacement. And then I believe it was task number 32 also needs a replacement. So let me go up here, back to the Resource tab, click the Assign Resources dialog box, and there's a Replace function here. So I'm going to take the technical writer. I'm going to replace the technical writer. I'll select their name, click Replace, go over here to the Replace Resource dialog box, select John McCartney, and click OK. So it just replaced the technical writer on that task with John McCartney. I'll leave the Assign Resources dialog box open, and I'll go down here to the next task where I need to make the replacement, number 27, create charging equipment maintenance procedures. And I'll do the same thing, select technical writer, replace with John McCartney, OK. And then I have one more to go here. Task number 32, technical writer, replace John McCartney. Okay. And it's that easy to replace people on your project. So now that I've done that, I've got a real person assigned to some of these tasks. I should now try to represent other types of things, other scheduling constraints that that person may have that's going to prevent them from potentially, or it's going to potentially interfere with their work on my project. So one thing that I know about John is I only have half of his time available to me to work on my project. I don't have him dedicated to me full time to work on this project. So if I were to look at John's utilization or his allocation on this project, it wouldn't be accurate. You know, he's assigned full time on these on the create EV charging marketing collateral task, and I also have him assigned full time to these other two tasks, number 25 number 25 and 27. But that's not accurate. If I want to represent his allocation on other non-project work, then there's two ways that I could do that. One way is I could add just another task or another line item to the end of my project. John's other stuff, we'll call it. And since this project runs for 90 days, I'm going to make this task also 90 days long. And then I'm going to assign John 50% of his time to this task. And that should then show me, that's a simple representation of the other stuff that John is working on in addition to what's going on or what he's assigned to in this project. So if I go up here, click Assign Resources, select that task, John's other stuff, and I select John's name in the Assign Resources dialog box, and I put 50 in there for 50%. Now I've got a simple representation of the other things that I know that John is already working on. Another way that I can manage this is by reducing John's available allocation units on this project. But first, before I do that, let me just stop here and take you to another view that shows us how much work now John is assigned to on this because of his assignments on this project, as well as John's other stuff that I've represented here on the last row of the project. If I go to another view in Microsoft Project called the Resource Usage view, this lists out all of the different resources that are assigned on my project. Concrete contractor, electrical contractor, installation engineer, and so forth. And below each resource's name, we have a listing of the tasks that are assigned to them. And so you can see here that the concrete contractor is assigned to one task, pour concrete pads. The electrical contractor is assigned to 4 tasks, and they're all listed out here, and so forth. And that's just in the left panel here in this view. In the right-hand panel, we see a representation on a timeline of how many work hours are assigned to each of these resources on each of these tasks and where those work hours fall on a timeline. So if I scroll down here to John McCartney's name, he's down here at the end of the list because I added him last to my project. I can see here a roll-up. If I just follow this row straight across the timeline, I can see a roll-up of all the hours worth of work that are assigned to John. Any place where I see red, there's a problem. There's an overallocation. So in this particular case right here, during the week of August 5th, John is assigned too much work. You can see here that he's got 20 hours of other stuff that he's assigned to during each of these weeks, but then you add that, or you combine that with the 40 hours of work that are assigned during this week here because I got him working on creating the EV charging marketing collateral. He's overallocated. We've got a problem. We don't necessarily need to do anything with it. We can just hope for the best. But it's better to know this now than later when it comes time for John to create the EV charging marketing collateral and it doesn't get done on time because he's already spending half of his week doing other stuff. I'd rather know about it now than when it's too late to make up the time. And we have some other cases down here towards the end of the project. during the week of October 21st and during the week of October 28th, we see another couple of problems here. We see 84 hours of work during the week of October 21st because he's doing 20 hours of other stuff, and then 32 hours he's assigned to creating charging equipment maintenance procedures, and 32 hours of work rather, where he's assigned to work on creating charging equipment usage procedures. So here we definitely have a problem, and because it's so close to the end of the project, this could really cause us to go past our deadline for this project. So, it's good to know about this now. So let me go back to the Gantt chart view, and I said that this is one way. Adding this other stuff row to the end of my project. This is one way that we can represent the scenario where John is only available half time because he's got other stuff that he's doing. If I delete that task, I can just right click and delete task. There's another way that I can represent that same type of a scenario. Rather than adding the other stuff to my project schedule, what I can do is go back to the resource sheet where John is listed, and I can modify John's max units. So there's a column here called max units that allows me to tell Microsoft Project how much of this person's time is available to help me on this project. And the default is 100%. In other words, they're available full-time to work on this project. But in this particular case, I know John is spending half of his time doing other stuff, so he only has half of his typical work week available to help me on this project. So I can just change that from 100% to 50%. And then that's another way of blocking out his time to work on other stuff. So then again, if I go back here to the Gantt chart view, I didn't point this out before, but I'll point it out now. Any place where John is assigned, we're seeing a little red person icon in this left-hand indicators column, indicating that there's somebody on this task who's overallocated. And then we also see that on these other tasks where we're creating the usage procedures and we're creating the maintenance procedures. It's probably because John is overallocated. I've assigned him to work full-time on those tasks, but he only has half of his time available to me to work on this project. And so again, if we go look at the resource usage view and go look at John, sure enough, even though I only have 40 hours of work assigned to him on this project, I know that he's only 50% available to me, so even 40 hours is too much, and it's displayed here as red. So now I have some different options available to me in terms of what I can do about this. I can just let it ride and hope for the best. I can maybe get John a helper to work on this task. Maybe I can find somebody else who has more availability. Maybe I can take this task and spread it out over 2 weeks. So depending on the scenario, there's different ways to resolve problems like this. And this can be, this could be a little bit misleading if you were to just look at the numbers here. Oh, 16 hours during the week of October 26th. That shouldn't cause John to be overallocated, but we're not seeing the whole picture here. What we're seeing here is how much he's assigned to this project, but he may also have other commitments that are causing conflict. And so again, depending on the scenario, I may want to find John a helper to lift some of the burden and do some of those tasks. I may want to spread those tasks over a longer duration if I have the time to do that, or I may need to find somebody else to do that work entirely. So to wrap up here, before I go, let me just give you a few things for you to take away. First thing is, you should learn the proper ways to assign resources to tasks in Microsoft Project. I showed you one of my favorite ways using the Assign Resources dialog box, but there are probably a half a dozen different ways that you can assign resources to tasks, and some of them will get you into trouble. So that would be one thing that I would recommend, that you research the different ways you can assign resources to tasks and use one of the more recommended ways of doing it like I demonstrated here. Second thing is, learn the relationship between duration, work, and assignment units in Microsoft Project. I pointed this out earlier where I supplied the duration of a task, I supplied the work effort for a task, and Microsoft Project calculated the assignment units for me. In the example that I gave you, there was a 5-day duration task with 20 hours of work effort. Microsoft Project calculated a 50% assignment units for that task when I assigned a resource to that task. You can supply any two of those three variables, duration, work effort, or assignment units, and Microsoft Project will calculate the third one for you. And then finally, number 3, I would strongly suggest that you learn how task types work in Microsoft Project. There's 3 different types of tasks, or 3 different choices of task types in Microsoft Project: fixed duration, fixed units, and fixed work. And although I didn't point that out here when I was assigning resources to tasks, because it doesn't really matter that much when you're initially making a resource assignment, it really does matter once you're in execution mode for this project and people actually start performing these tasks. Things rarely go according to plan, and you're probably going to need to make changes to tasks in your project. You're going to need to put in actual start dates, actual finish dates, and actual work effort, and so forth. And as things change, the scheduling engine in Microsoft Project is going to recalculate things for you. And so the task type, fixed duration, fixed units, or fixed work, is going to govern how it performs those recalculations as you're putting in real information, actual information into your project schedule. So thanks for tuning in and spending this time with me here today. I hope that you found this information useful and it was worth your time. Before you go, one quick reminder for you. If you're not tuning in directly on my website, tonyzink.com, then you can go there to find the video for this episode and others like it. You can find the links where I hang out on social media. So if you want to follow me on your favorite social media channel, you'll get updates when I post new training videos to my website, or when I announce new webinars like this one. And you can find other good things on my website too. So until we meet again, go back out there and keep building great things.